Hey everyone, my name is Brennan, I hope you're just been going good. And have you ever wanted to slaughter hundreds upon thousands of people? Yes? Well, if you're thinking what I'm thinking, then you should probably be in prison. But what about slaughtering hundreds of thousands of virtual people? Yeah? Well then boy do I have the game for you, you loon. After what fans are calling the Great Nintendo Drought of 2020, a lot of people are anticipating the big end's upcoming holiday title, that being Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. This game will be a prequel to one of Nintendo's, more small titles. I don't know if you've heard of it, called The Legend of Zelda Breath of the F***ing Wild. The f***ing was there to emphasize the title of the game. It's not actually part of the title, silly. The main story of Breath of the Wild takes place 100 years after an event known as the Great Calamity, which is when it being known as Calamity Ganon took over Hyrule and corrupted their army of machines called Guardians. These Guardians were meant to fight off Calamity Ganon's forces, but ultimately ended up leading to the kingdom's demise and the events of Breath of the Wild 100 years later. Following? Well, I hope so, because I'm gonna keep going anyways. Age of Calamity takes place during the period of time 100 years before Whaddya, and has more heavy emphasis on the story. See, because Breath of the Wild was designed to be a very open and explorative game, the story tends to take a backseat, only really being in the forefront at the beginning of the game, during boss fights / boss quests, during random memories found throughout the world, and at the end of the game. We're told a lot about the Great Calamity and what happened prior to the events of Breath of the Wild, but we never get to experience them for ourselves. That is, until now. Age of Calamity isn't a typical Zelda game. Instead, it's a spin-off game in the Dynasty Warriors series, which are a series of hack-and-slash games where, to explain it to you simply, you play as an overpowered beast of a character and fight hordes of enemies in warlike battles. The first Dynasty Warriors game released on the PlayStation on February 28, 1997, developed by the studios Koei, now Koei Tecmo, and Omega Force. Unlike modern Warriors games, the style of game that Dynasty Warriors was originally more akin to something like Soul Calibur, a one-on-one fighting game rather than the massive battles we're used to seeing now. It wasn't until Dynasty Warriors 2 that the modern style of Dynasty Warriors games started to take form. Look, they added an X-axis. This is unheard of! Dynasty Warriors 2 released August 3rd, 2000 for the PlayStation 2 and was a beat-em-up hack-and-slash game where you would fight massive battles against an opposing army. The game also had a good level of strategy to it as well to balance out the endless slaughter that's typical of Dynasty Warriors. Let's jump ahead roughly 14 years though, to August 24th, 2014, when Hyrule Warriors, the Legend of Zelda / Dynasty Warriors spin-off game, released on Nintendo's oh-so-popular console, the Wii... The Hyrule Wacky Hacky Slashy Box. Hyrule Warriors, as you would probably imagine, took elements from the Legend of Zelda series and implemented them into the game with Dynasty Warriors style gameplay. Who would have guessed? The game has the player partaking in massive battles in locations from throughout the Legend of Zelda series, while playing as such fan favorite characters as Blue Bitch, Bug Girl, and Kids Avert Your Eyes. As you play through each stage, you'll be given different objectives depending on the scenario and stage, capturing keeps, escorting something or someone, or defeating an enemy on the field, just for a few examples. Capturing keeps throughout the map will increase your troop count and give you an advantage in the battle overall. One other big aspect of these battles are your special abilities. Each character has their own special abilities that they charge up throughout the battle, as shown by the meters by your health. The first special meter is built up by collecting little Triforce-like pieces on the battlefield, as well as from fighting enemies. Your other special gauge can only be built up by collecting mana vials, which, like the Triforce pieces, are found throughout each stage. Activating either of these special meters will make your character unleash an over-the-top special move which mows through large hordes of enemies and does a lot of damage to stronger enemies. One more thing to note as well is that you have different equipment items which can be used to interact with certain objects or can be used to open up enemy weak points. These weak points allow you to do major damage to stronger enemies. They can be opened up by using the equipment like I just mentioned, or can alternatively be opened up by an enemy letting their guard down. You might be wondering though, how am I playing as Boatman on sand? Well, Hyrule Warriors' story is a massive crossover of sorts for the franchise, taking characters and locations from Zoot, Zum, La, toilet papers, Albua, and fanfiction. The story also throws in some new characters into the mix, like PG-13 over here. Was it worth it, Nintendo? Was the teen rating really worth it? You horny bastards, you. Rated T for this game may contain tits. The story for the game starts off pretty basic for all things considered, introducing some new characters and having a few instances where the games cross over. For about the first 3 or 4 stages, it's like this. It's not really until later into the story where things start getting more unique. All of a sudden, different locations from other time periods start appearing, bringing the crossover aspect of the whole game. I'd say from that point on, the story's pretty solid for what it is. Besides the fact that they made Ganon a surprise villain again. Oh yay! It didn't really work last time. I don't know how they let it happen twice, but whatever, at least it's not a mainline game. But why mention all this? I thought you were supposed to be talking about Awok! Well, I thought it'd be useful to go over the background behind Age of Calamity and the Warriors series. That way I can draw comparisons between the 2 Hyrule Warrior games to see what's been improved and added in the new one. A little while ago, a fairly lengthy demo dropped for Age of Calamity, so I'll be taking my footage and impressions from that. Also, as a heads up, since I am going to be talking about the demo, there will be spoilers for some things early on in the game, specifically the first 2 stages. With that out of the way, let's start talking some Batwa Awok. So, the demo opens up on a cutscene of the Guardians ripping through Hyrule Castle Town during the Great Calamity, and then shows the moment that Zelda unlocks her power in order to protect Link. Once those powers awaken, the camera pans up to Zelda's room in Hyrule Castle, showing huge rays of light bursting from the windows. We get a closer look at what's causing this light, to then see a miniature Guardian awaken from within a box. The Guardian opens up a portal, jumps through, and is sent into the past, back when Hyrule was still preparing for Calamity Ganon's arrival. Bits of malice, which is what Calamity Ganon used to corrupt the Guardians, also made their way into the past with it. This essentially brings in even more time travel to a timeline of games already loaded with time travel. You hear that, Marty? This smaller Guardian essentially serves to warn the people of Hyrule in the past about what will come in the future if they can't stop the Great Calamity. The first stage of the game takes place whilst Hyrule Castle is under siege by monsters. In the middle of the battle, though, is when Link and the rest of the main cast run into the miniature Guardian for the first time. The second stage of the game is all about Link, Zelda, and Impa attempting to bring the strange mini-Guardian to the ancient tech lab in Hitino Village. On their way, though, they're ambushed by monsters, and on top of that, one of the Guardians are corrupted by one of the bits of malice that made their way through the portal. This leads to a super fun chase sequence, with the majority of the level afterwards being about destroying the Guardian using other Guardian lasers. Once the 3 reach the tech lab, aged down Robbie... MJ? And aged up Pura? Go into the mini-Guardian's memory. There they discover the truth about where the mini-Guardian had come from. It even have photos of the events that occur in the future, those being of the Great Calamity. Here, the demo cuts off, with the rest of the game being playable in the full version, available November 20th for Nintendo Switch systems, just for your information. I'm not a sellout. I would never do something like that. Looking at the story alone for this game already shows great promise. While the big crossover story from the original Hyrule Warriors was fun, the story in Age of Calamity was just really engaging, at least for me personally. We get to spend way more time with these really interesting characters that would otherwise have been pushed to the side. One of my favorite characters so far is the Tech Lab researcher Robbie, who's a really wacky and over-the-top personality. The game was able to bring some more life to a character that if I'm being honest, kind of forgot existed until this game was revealed. As for each of the stages, or at least the 2 I could play, I really enjoyed them, and I think they're massive improvements over the ones in the original Hyrule Warriors. The stages from that game were good, but tended to be smaller in scale and even a bit cramped at times compared to the new game. The stages in Awok feel a lot more free and open, whether it's literally or just with how your character can move around the stage. The game also just feels more Breath of the Wild-y, if that makes sense. There are 2 main things that I think contribute to that. The first is the fact that the stages are actual locations of Breath of the Wild. The game takes Breath of the Wild's map, cleans things up a bit to make them less Calamity-y, and repurposes them for Age of Calamity. The stage select map is even the same map from Breath of the Wild. The other thing that I think adds to the freeness in these stages is the fact that you can interact with the environment way more. In the original Hyrule Warriors game, you could only really interact with pots, grass, and rocks. Age of Calamity, on the other hand, lets you interact with more of your surroundings, just like in Breath of the Wild. Barrels, crates, trees, even larger structures like tents and rocks. Look, box? No box, this is revolutionary. There's even a moment I remember from when I was playing the demo where I was low on health fleeing from a Guardian and decided to hide behind a large barricade. Just when I thought I was safe though, the Guardian fires its laser and causes the barricade to break in a massive explosion. It's just a game though, so there's nothing to be worried about. On top of this, the game also adds another level of interactivity by bringing in all of the rune abilities from Breath of the Wild. These, along with elemental rods, are this game's replacement for the equipment in Hyrule Warriors. You can still use Cryonis to freeze water, now with the added bonus of freezing the enemies surrounding it in the water. You can still use Magnesis to move metal objects and even take the enemy's weapons and use them against them. You can still use Stasis to stop time on enemies and objects and hit them to send them launching. And finally, you can still use Bomb to... You can also use these rune abilities to counter enemies and open up their weak points like in Hyrule Warriors. For example, a shield is weak to a bomb.
Huh, there's no way you're gonna be able to break through my shield. Whoa, 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 calm down, man, calm down.
As for the elemental rods I mentioned, they basically just allow you to cast fire, frost, or lightning spell down on enemies to damage them. The last thing I think I need to mention are the playable characters. The game starts you out with Link, who's essentially the basic fighter of the playable warriors, having sword, shield, and bow. The shield and bow are actually new additions in this Warriors game compared to the previous one, and are another way the Age of Calamity makes itself more like Breath of the Wild. The developers added the bow and shield combat from Breath of the Wild, meaning you go into bullet time with the bow and can block and parry attacks with the shield. The game also adds in the paraglider from Breath of the Wild, as well as the noob ability of wall jumping. The next character you'll be able to play as is Hydrated Impa, 100 years prior to her endlessly sitting on a pillow and now looking almost identical to her granddaughter. Impa's main character gimmick is that she can collect symbols from enemies. Once she collects enough of these, she can create duplicates of herself to fight alongside her for a period of time. The last character you get the chance to play as in the demo is Princess Zelda. To put it simply, her abilities are basically just, but what if we took all 4 runes and made a cluster out of them? Her main attack is just a mix of all 4 of the different rune abilities. One cool thing about this being her way of attacking though is that she also gets her own unique versions of the rune abilities to use as well. Tell me, what's cooler than a bomb? A bomb with legs, that's right, this is amazing! Besides those 3, the only other characters that we have confirmed for the game are the 4 champions. We've even been shown some gameplay of new vehicle sections where you get to play as the Divine Beast, which is something really new and interesting that I think will go well with the game and that I look forward to playing. And that's everything we know about Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity so far. From what I've played and seen, it looks really promising. It built off the original Hyrule Warriors and made a lot of improvements. So, have I convinced you to pick up the game or at least try out the demo? No? How about now, where you have to slaughter hundreds upon thousands of people? Yeah? If that's the case, then I'm gonna need you to sign this restraining order because I want you nowhere f***ing near me. Hyrule Warriors, as you would probably imagine, took elements from the Legend of Zelda series and implemented them into the Dynasty Warriors series style of gameplay. Who would have guessed this game has the player partaking in massive Zelda? What the fuck?